What's up, YouTube? It's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and I'm back with my annual winners and losers of the NBA draft. Now, for people out there who don't know, I'm not the biggest college fan. I dabble in it here and there, especially when a player or two grabs my attention, but I still find myself doing this every single year just because it tends to be a bit funny looking back at my videos a year later and figuring out how wrong I am. So for people out there who may be offended because I claim that your favorite college player really and truly isn't that good, please don't. I'm not an expert at college basketball whatsoever. I'm way more knowledgeable about the NBA. Now, with that being said, before we move into my winners and losers, we first have to address who exactly was drafted to which team. Now, what you see on the screen is the original draft order. So what I'm going to do is just go through some transactions, and so you can get a better understanding of how exactly we got from point A to point Z. First, we have the Anthony Davis trade, in which the Pelicans sent over AD to the Lakers, and in return, the Lakers sent over a slew of assets, one of which was the 4th overall pick to the Pelicans. Then after that, we have the Allen Crabbe, Taurean Prince transaction between the Brooklyn Nets and the Atlanta Hawks. In that transaction, the Brooklyn Nets also sent over the 17th overall pick to the Hawks to absorb the ridiculous Allen Crabbe contract. After that, we have the Mike Conley trade, which is a bit more recent. I don't know if people thoroughly understand what exactly transpired in that transaction, but in the Mike Conley trade, Mike Conley was sent over to the Utah Jazz, and in return, the Memphis Grizzlies received a slew of assets, one of which was the 23rd overall pick. Next, we have the Suns and Timberwolves doing a pick swap, and because the Timberwolves moved from the 11th to the 6th overall pick, then the Phoenix Suns also received Dario Saric. After that, we have the New Orleans Pelicans and the Atlanta Hawks trading picks. The Hawks originally had 2 picks, which was their 8th overall pick and the 10th overall pick from the Dallas Mavericks, obviously due to that Luka Doncic and Trae Young transaction last year during the draft. And then again, like I alluded to earlier, they picked up the 17th overall pick thanks to the Allen Crabbe and Taurean Prince transaction. But then the Atlanta Hawks decided to trade the 8th and 17th overall pick and move up to the 4th selection as the Pelicans moved down to the 8th and 17th pick. Then we have Milwaukee trading Tony Snell and the 30th overall pick to the Detroit Pistons for Jon Leuer. And then after that, a bunch of late first-round picks and players were exchanged amongst teams that basically gave us this draft order. And so now with the correct draft order, I'm going to put the names corresponding to the teams that they were drafted by, or quote-unquote drafted by. And so now you have a better understanding of where to expect some of these prospects to end up on by the beginning of the season. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and move into my winners and losers. Now, we're going to start off positive and talk about my winners. Up first, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Pelicans obviously pulling away with Zion Williamson with the 1st overall pick is a massive plus. He's a great athlete, great rebounder, has a high motor defensively, is extremely flexible. And the one thing that really separates Zion from a lot of players at his height and size is that he is a really good passer. The one thing I am concerned about Zion, and I think a lot of people are concerned about it, is his inability to score outside of the paint. Even though he was a beast in transition and finishing around the rim, if you are unable to shoot the 3 ball, you're going to be putting your team at a massive disadvantage, which is also another concern that I saw with their 8th overall pick with Jackson Hayes. Even though I like Jackson Hayes and I think he's a huge plus at the 5 position, as I was really concerned about them pulling out Jahlil Okafor at the 5, and I really didn't like that. And Jackson Hayes feels like a player who's going to be a really good pro in the NBA, but even Jackson Hayes offensively is extremely limited, and that is a massive concern when you see the rest of the lineup for the Pelicans, as there really isn't that much 3-point shooting at all. But defensively, and it seems like the identity of this Pelicans team is already there, which is something that a lot of teams, and I mean that sincerely, a lot of teams in the NBA cannot say the same. And we're talking about even teams who don't necessarily have young cores. Next up, we have the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm from Atlanta, so, my Hawks out here doing their thing. I love the fact that they picked up both Hunter and Cam Reddish. Now, there are a lot of questions about what exactly both of those players are going to bring to the floor offensively, because they are very, very raw in those regards. Neither one of them are really good shooters whatsoever. However, I believe Reddish is actually a way better prospect than a lot of people give him credit for. He was just in a really bad situation, in my opinion, dealing with both RJ Barrett and Zion on his team, and him not figuring out how exactly he's going to fit on that roster. But in Atlanta, and this is the reason why I love this fit for both of those players, in Atlanta, it's very clear on what exactly they have. Two shooters in the backcourt with Huerter and Trae Young, another really good rim running big who actually has added a three-point shot to his game as well in John Collins. And if you can get some versatility in the forward spots from both Hunter and Reddish on the defensive end, I think the Atlanta Hawks are moving in the right direction. Then finally, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, if the Grizzlies only selected Ja Morant, then I would have easily given them a huge W in this year's draft class. The Grizzlies can immediately make that transition that they desperately need to take in the new era in Memphis, having Ja replace Mike Conley. But then late in the first round, they also selected Brandon Clarke. And in my opinion, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I believe that Brandon Clarke was the best player on Gonzaga last year. He was a great rim runner, high motor, great rebounder. I believe defensively he has a really, really high ceiling. Obviously, when it comes to him spacing out the floor and knocking down that three-point shot, that's a bit of a question mark there, especially because his shooting form just really isn't that good whatsoever. But him coming off of the bench behind Jaren Jackson Jr. and potentially even playing a small ball lineup, I love that for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I actually believe that the Grizzlies have the potential to be a really interesting and fun team moving forward. So I like what the Grizzlies, Pelicans, and the Hawks did this year, and hopefully they continue to move in the right direction. Now moving on to our losers, we're going to stay in Gonzaga, and I'm going to go with the Washington Wizards, selecting Rui Hachimura with the 9th overall pick. There are so many questions behind what he brings to the table that it just blows me away that anybody would even think about selecting him 10th overall. And out of all of the teams that I decided to watch this year, that Gonzaga team really caught my eye, so I did spend a lot of time watching them. And I'm going to just make this argument again, and I don't care what anybody says. Brandon Clarke was the better player during the tournament for Gonzaga. Furthermore, Rui isn't a great rebounder. He's not that great of a passer. He's definitely not a good defender. And when it comes to just his overall athleticism, it's lackluster at best. Granted, he is a really solid finisher and he finds himself around the rim pretty consistently, but his game in today's NBA, I just don't see how it's going to translate. Next up, we have the Charlotte Hornets selecting PJ Washington, and I'm just confused to why exactly they decided to do this. I don't know what exactly Charlotte is doing. Last year they got Bridges, they also have Bacon, they also have Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, so they have a plethora of 6'7" to 6'8" forwards already on their team, all of them still relatively young. Selecting another one just doesn't make any sense, especially when PJ Washington is not a shooter. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And then also keep in mind that the Hornets could lose both Kemba Walker and Jeremy Lamb, so the fact that they didn't go after Tyler Hero is just ridiculous since he was right there. And then finally we have the Phoenix Suns, and I'm just going to say it. Look, I think Cameron Johnson is going to be a solid pro, but selecting him 11th overall, that's just ridiculous, especially when many people had him pegged around a late first round to second round pick. And yes, you can make an argument that after some workouts and some really good shoot arounds, he moved his way up into the draft. And so I'll give him credit where credit is due. But here's the biggest reason to why this is so problematic. With the 6th overall pick, the fact that they only received an 11th pick and Dario Saric is just mind-blowing to me. But then add on top of the fact that earlier in the day, they traded away TJ Warren and a second rounder for cash consideration. Mind you, TJ Warren is coming off a season in which he's an 18-point scorer and he shot above 40% from behind the arc. And he's only 2 years older than Cameron Johnson. So whatever you think you're going to get out of Cameron Johnson, more than likely you already had with TJ Warren, but also he's 23. He's older than Devin Booker. Before the season begins, I think he's actually going to be 24. But again, he's older than Devin Booker, so you're not even getting younger. Now, before we wrap up the video, here are my bust and sleepers. When it comes to my bust, I have Rui, because to me, Rui being selected 9th overall is just ridiculous. And my other bust, this is going to shock a lot of people, but it's going to be RJ Barrett. I think RJ Barrett has a lot of upside, but there's still a lot of concerns about his game. And for my Knicks fans out there, if you really believe that he is just a shoo-in to be the next franchise player for New York. Let me just tell you right now, it's not that simple. And if those are the expectations that you are holding RJ Barrett to, then there's a really good chance that he will be a bust. After that, when it comes to my sleepers, I have Cam Reddish because I'm still kind of surprised he slid all the way to 9. I'm surprised that no other team gave him a real chance or opportunity. After that, I have Brandon Clark. I'm a huge fan. I don't know how he was selected all the way in the late 20s and Rui was selected 9th overall. Just blows me away. And then finally, we have Grant Williamson. I'm not too familiar on his game himself, but I saw some highlights, saw a couple of articles talking about him, and it seems as if he has a high ceiling. He was drafted by the Boston Celtics, who already have a slew of other forwards who kind of fit the same profile, but be on the lookout for him as well. And with all that being said, people, please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Don't be too harsh on me because, again, I'm not the biggest college fan out there. But until next time, I will see you all later. Peace.